Hi, this is Steve Rigolosi, also known as Editorial Dude. I've been away for a while, thanks to the endless supply of nor'easters that have hit the Northeast. But I'm back because I thought of a topic to share with you guys. And that topic is words to eliminate from your vocabulary, or words to eliminate from your writing. Now, I should preface that with a caveat by saying that there are times when it's okay to use these words, when they're being used correctly, which is not most of the time in my experience. So I jotted down this little list of really misused words in writing and in conversation. And so I put this out there to all writers as being words that editors love to get out their red pencil or the electronic equivalent thereof and strike from a manuscript and quite possibly roll their eyes as they're doing it. I should also mention, and I've said this several times, that all editors have their pet peeves. So there are some things that I don't particularly bother me that send other editors, through the roof with rage. There are things that bug me that people look at me and say, chillax, dude, like what's the big deal? But, I don't think any editor makes these decisions. When you're a working editor, you just realize what works and what doesn't, and what might lead to confusion, and what is the better alternative that will lead to clarity. And so you form these opinions over the course of, a career or years and years of editing, rather than, I know very few editors who stick to what I would call the handbook approach to editing, which is that there's one rule and you must always do it this way. Otherwise, you're just a doofus. Things like these rules that we've all heard, like, never end a sentence with a preposition. Well, sometimes it's totally fine to end a sentence with a preposition if rejiggering it is going to make it sound weird or awkward. So, okay, that said, let me give you the first bad word. It is the following. If I can ever get my fingers onto this piece of paper, is literally. God, what the misuse of this word is legion and epic. And I hear it all the time in conversation. I mean, it's sort of like, I literally died when I heard that. Or, oh, I literally crapped my pants when I saw that, episode of Dexter. I hope you didn't literally crap your pants. So literally means it happened, right? There is no room for interpretation. It is what you see is what you get. What you say is what took place. And a lot of the times when people say literally or write literally, they mean the exact opposite. They mean metaphorically, which is the opposite of literally. So to say you literally died means your heart stopped beating. You're lying inert. You're never going to wake up again. To say it metaphorically just means, you were so shocked that you were momentarily unable to do anything, or you're looking to convey, your great horror or shock or whatever other emotion by saying that you died. Adding that word literally is what does you in, because you could say, God, I thought I was going to die. An exaggeration, but people will get what you mean. Or I felt like dying. Again, another exaggeration, maybe when you're embarrassed, but people get it. But when you add that word literally in a situation that calls for a metaphor or a comparison, it's a bad thing. And I see it in writing all the time. So, with that said, when used correctly, literally can be a very powerful word. You're saying, this really took place. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not telling tales. I'm not fibbing. It truly happened. And that can add to the shock. Like, I'll give you an example from my own life. When I was a teenager, I literally saw someone get beheaded. I was, complicated story, but it was at this junction of all these highways, and a huge tractor trailer was trying to swing from the ramp onto the road, and this little Carmen Ghia, this far off the ground, didn't feel like waiting. He tried to zoom around the truck. Instead, he went under the truck and decapitated himself. I watched his head get sliced off and roll away. So I literally saw someone get beheaded, or I saw someone get literally beheaded. That's the way to use literally. So I leave you with that very lovely visual to think about each time you're tempted to use the word literally. And I don't mean this video to sound snotty. I just mean it to advocate for more precision in the language. Okay, and phrase number 2. This one, striking. Of some sort. So, there was a dog of some sort running through my yard. Or, she lived in a house of some sort. Well, of some sort is implied, right? House is a very generic noun. It could be a split level. It could be a ranch. It could be a Cape Cod. It could be a mansion. It could be a tar paper shack. It could be a shotgun shack. It could be any one of a million things. So, by definition, any of these very general nouns have the phrase of some sort included with them in terms of their dictionary meaning or denotation. So anytime you say of some sort, you're adding a phrase that doesn't have to be there. And fewer words are better in almost all cases. I'm forever advocating that writers tighten their sentences, get rid of extraneous words. Of some sort is almost always extraneous. There are books of some sort on my shelves, right? There are books on my shelves. Of course, they're of different types. It just goes without saying. So don't say it. Okay. Number 3, this is the triumvirate. In nature, in shape, and in color. So all of those phrases signal adjectives. And adjectives, by definition, describe. You don't need to add these extraneous phrases to clarify your adjective. The adjective should do that on its own, right? So the test was difficult in nature. Or the test was difficult. The beach ball was round in shape. Well, round is a shape, right? The beach ball is round. Or my favorite, the sky was blue in color. What other definition does blue have? Well, I guess it does have the meaning of blue, sad, depressed, but you know what I mean. So these phrases in nature, in shape, in color, let's add in number. The children were 7 in number. Get rid of them. You don't need them. They sound puffed up and kind of silly. So nix them. Number 4. I hear this one a lot too. And I see it too. And it's intended to imply that something that happened or a situation is the opposite of something else. And that word is actually. Highly, highly overused adjective. So I was in a restaurant not too long ago where the server came and asked what we were all having, and the friend I was sitting next to said, "Oh, actually, I'll be having the steak tartare," or whatever it was. Actually, you'll be having that steak instead of theoretically? No, people throw that word in all over the place to imply maybe something different than what was expected. But that's not what the word means. So be cautious about how you use actually. You could say, I thought it would be raining today, but actually it was sunny. I guess that would be okay, but you'd be just as well off not including the word actually at all. Look at the word actually anytime you see it in writing and say to yourself, does it have to be here? Does it make sense, or does it sound kind of silly if I really read my prose word by word? Does it clarify my meaning, or is it just unnecessary verbiage? Okay. The next triumvirate. These are all good abbreviations, but I would argue that they really don't belong in any sort of formal writing. I.e., e.g., and etc. So i.e. Latin for that is, e.g. Latin, for example, etc., and so on. So the problem with the first two of these, i.e. and e.g., is that a lot of people don't know what they mean. To me, they're almost like the verbal equivalent of math. You know how some people, the minute they see any sort of mathematical formula or equation, even the simplest arithmetic, panic? There's a lot of, in America, a lot of math fear. I think IE and EG create that same kind of fear, as if people think, what does this mean? Oh, I can't take it. Oh, I'm about to shut down. I'm about to literally die. It's just as easy to spell out that is, or for example. Often you see IE and EG in parentheses. Okay, it feels rather informal. Sometimes you'll see them at the start of a sentence, like IE, or I'm reading the new F. Paul Wilson book, i.e. The God Gene. You don't need the IE. Right? You say, I'm reading the new F. Paul Wilson book, comma, The God Gene, in italics, or underline. So often they're not even necessary. I do like the phrase, for example. I think a lot of people learn very, very well by example. And it's, as a teaching method, it goes back millennia. So having examples in your writing, especially when you're writing nonfiction, is definitely to be encouraged. They can make the difference between all the understanding in the world and a complete lack of comprehension. But say, for example, or for instance, don't keep saying EG, because the EG makes those examples almost sound like throwaways or something after the fact, whereas I would argue that the example is part of the exposition or the definition, right? Maybe not literally, Okay, there's a good use of that word, but but they're good to have. Etc. is very, very informal. If you use etc. when you're writing something, it makes you as a writer look lazy. It makes people think he or she couldn't be bothered to finish this list, or he's just leaving it to my imagination to figure out what the other elements here that I'm supposed to know about. Whenever I see it, I take it out. I recommend taking it out, whether the author accepts that editorial suggestion is up to that person. But most of the time they do, because they see what I'm getting at. Etc. is great in informal writing or in conversation. It can be quite humorous. Like you say, oh, I went to a wedding and it had, ugly bridesmaids' dresses and bad chicken and drunken guests, etc. Then you're pulling on sort of a shared cultural experience of knowing all of those horrific things that go with so many weddings. But informal writing, not so much. So I recommend not doing. Okay, last but not least, another evil triumvirate. In a blank manner, in a blank fashion, on a blank basis. So these are all wordy and not good ways to use adverbs. So you could say, she dressed in a fashionable manner, meaning she dressed fashionably, or she was fashionable. Equally good. A lot of people don't like adverbs, and editors don't like adverbs. I'll do a separate video on that sometime, because they are the part of speech that I have the most trouble with. I just can't figure out how I feel about them. But a different topic for a different day. I saw her on a regular basis. I saw her regularly. So anytime you see in a blank manner, in a blank fashion, on a blank basis, you know that there is a faster, more efficient, less wordy way of saying it. And that's my, I'll be brave. I'll call it, that's my shit list for the day. I have many shit lists in life, but these phrases and words I talked about today are kind of on the editorial/vocabulary shit list. So as I like to do with these videos, I'd like to close with a recommendation for an author I really like and whom I recommend. And I always try to say who I think will like the books and who I think may not like the book so much. So today's featured guest, and he is a fellow New Jerseyan, although not from my part of the state as I understand, is F. Paul Wilson. And this is a treasured book of mine. The Keep was, I believe, his first novel, although he's been quite prolific. I may be wrong about that, but I don't think I am. I got this at Schiller's bookstore in the Garden State Plaza decades ago. Cover price $12.95. That shows how long ago it was. And I've been a fan ever since. So for those of you who don't know F. Paul Wilson, his most famous character is Repairman Jack. I'm starting to think, did I already recommend F. Paul Wilson in another video? I may have done, but I like him so much, I'll do it twice. So his lead character is Repairman Jack, who is, I would call him a soldier of fortune, but he's a man who lives off the grid in New York City, who basically goes around righting wrongs for people who have been done dirt to. Usually they're being stalked by a creep, or they're having, some problem with the mob, or, all of that stuff that happens in, I was going to say urban settings, but, everywhere. And so Jack always manages to mete out poetic justice, which I love. I love poetic justice in fiction and in life. It's one of my favorite things. It doesn't happen often enough in real life, sadly. But throughout all of the Repairman Jack books, there's another plot that becomes more as the series progresses, which is about this kind of cosmic battle between these two forces called the ally and the otherness. And it's not as simple as good versus evil. I'll let that saga unfold for you. I don't want to get into spoilers or anything. But the books are so much fun to read and so fast. They've got great action, great lines. The plotting is terrific. They keep your attention. And I'm really big on the idea that fiction has to be entertaining, right? It's one of the reasons why I always grit my teeth a little bit when I'm starting a book that has been positioned as literary fiction, right? Because a lot of times it lacks a story or a plot. I just read a book, I won't mention any names, where the writing was beautiful. I mean, there was no question. The man was a superb writer, but I got through 300 pages and I was like, where's the story? There was no story. And that often happens in literary fiction, or at least the literary fiction that ends up on my desk that I read. I don't edit too much literary fiction. People don't ask me to do that. Genre fiction, yes, but literary fiction, not so much. Maybe because they sense I have a bad attitude about it, which I don't. I love literature. I love literary fiction, and some of my favorite books of the last few years are literary fiction, like David Mean's Hystopia, Dexter Palmer's Version Control, Joyce Carol Oates' Book of American Martyrs. I could go on and on. But some literary fiction lacks a plot. I like when I'm reading a novel for it to be entertaining. And F. Paul Wilson is always entertaining. He's always throwing unexpected things at you. Great chases. The books are cinematic, but without, sometimes people use cinematic as kind of a backhanded compliment. I am using it as a forward-handed compliment, in that you can really envision them. You know what's going on. And, I've followed all these books over the course of his career. He's also done a bunch of standalones. This one here, Sims. When I picked it up, I, of course, made the connection in my mind about those, the Sims video games where you create a world and have people interact. And those games were actually really boring and dull, in my opinion. But the book, The Sims, is anything but. It's about kind of a... I don't want to give it too much away. It's basically about a medical experiment to create a race of subservient beings, and how they're, they have feelings and emotions and desires, and yet they're treated like robots. It's really heartbreaking and sad. But the book was very, very good. And now Dr. Wilson, I believe he's a physician, just started a new series. The first book that came out, I want to say a year or so ago, was this one right here, Panacea. And the new one that just came out is The God Gene. And that's on my list of books to buy the next time I'm in a bookstore. I've got some extra dollars to play with. And it just so happens this very night I'm going to start the last of the Repairman Jack books, called Fear City. This one was written after all the other ones. It's part of a trilogy called Repairman Jack's Early Years. Because Repairman Jack, or RJ, as he's known to his fans. I think his fans just kept harassing Dr. Wilson, unto death to provide more Repairman Jack books. And finally, Wilson said, all right, leave me the hell alone. I'll give you 3 more books. And he did. But now he's on to this new series. So, if you like that kind of revengey, mysterious thriller, and you like a little paranormal element, and you like New York City plots, definitely check out F. Paul Wilson. If you don't like any of that stuff, he may not be your cup of tea. Interestingly, I'm pretty fascinated by gender gaps or lack thereof in reading. At some of the conventions I go to, I hear quite a bit about these. Are certain writers women's writers or men's writers? And I remember being in a really good panel about noir fiction. And what I took away from that was that, just as many women read noir as men do, which kind of surprised me. I maybe that's a bad thing to admit, but at that same convention, I talked to a bunch of guys who devour Mary Higgins Clark, right? Who I think of as more appealing to women, because she's her protagonists are always these successful, very well-dressed women. There's a lot of attention paid to clothes in Mary Higgins Clark's books. So I would, but anyone I've ever talked to who's been as much of an F. Paul Wilson fan as I am has been male. So any women out there who love F. Paul Wilson, please comment and tell us why you enjoy F. Paul Wilson and help us spread the word. Okay, so that's it on this Sunday evening in between your Easters. Let's hope they are gone forever, or at least until 2019. Preferably gone forever. Okay, everybody, thank you and have a good night. And if you've got any suggestions, please comment away and I'll see what I can do. Okay, good night.